We're decoding ancient sigils and punching necromancers. That's right! It's Arkham Horror, the role-playing game from Edge Studio. In this arcane adventure in Arkham, players take on the role of investigators, people who through fate, chance, or design have been plucked from their everyday lives and thrown into a world of the supernatural. Meanwhile, one other player takes the role of Game Master, a narrator and exposition provider of the story. The Game Master also takes the role of all non-player characters in the game, allies or enemies, aberrations, and entities. Like all great role-playing games, Arkham Horror lets the players tell the story through exploration, character dialogue, and narrative choices. The core gameplay mechanic of Arkham Horror revolves around the dynamic pool system, or DPS. Each character in the game, both player characters and non-player characters, have their own pool of dice. When they wish to perform a task within the narrative of the story, they spend dice from that pool. Spending can be as simple as discarding them from the pool or rolling them to determine an outcome, depending on the situation. These pools refill at various points in the game, such as the start of a new scene, or in the case of a turn-based event, at the start of a player's turn. If a character becomes injured or hindered by some effect, their dice pool shrinks in size. Thus, a character's dice pool is both their action economy and their health gauge. Pretty cool. Characters in the game all have a variety of skills. Skills have a name and value measured in 5 levels: bad, normal, good, amazing, and phenomenal. Those numbers next to each name are the minimum result a player needs to roll on one of their dice when using that skill in order to succeed. For instance, if my adventurous investigator, Polly Poltenheimer, needs to somersault off the back of a pickup truck to avoid the claws of a ravenous ghoul, I'll roll my agility skill. Since Polly has amazing agility, I'll need to roll a 3 or better on one of my rolled dice to succeed in dodging the attack. Various game effects and situational factors might add dice to a player's hand of dice they roll for an action. Multiple dice rolled together are calculated separately. Their results aren't added. Any dice that result in the target number or higher are considered a success. Anything else is a failure. A result of 1 is always a failure, a result of 6 is always a success. There are 3 types of actions a player can take in the game: simple actions, complex actions, and reactions. Simple actions are easy everyday tasks: moving from one room to another, opening a door, a chest, or a hatch, reloading a weapon, things like that. When performing a simple action in the game, the character spins 1 die from their pool. They don't need to roll, the action automatically succeeds. See page 20 of the rules for a variety of simple action examples. Complex actions involve some degree of skill, like picking a lock, climbing a gothic edifice, fist-fighting a bat-winged monstrosity. If they have at least 1 die left in their pool, a character can perform a complex action. They choose how many dice from their pool they want to spend, increasing their chances for a success with each die. They then select a relevant skill and add any dice from game effects or special abilities. They then roll this hand of dice. If at least 1 die is equal to or greater than their level in that skill, they succeed. Not all complex actions are created equally though. Some tasks are notably harder than others. If a task is labeled difficult by game rules or by the call of the Game Master, the complex action must generate 2 successes in order for it to be completed. A very difficult task must generate 3 successes. Reactions are similar to complex actions, but can only be used in response to another character's action. For instance, dodging a ranged attack, avoiding an environmental hazard, or resisting an enchantment from a conniving fell lord. Alright, enough rules for a second. Let's talk character creation, which is broken into 5 easy steps. Determine background. Choose a personality trait. Choose an archetype. Determine starting skill levels, and equipment and advancement. First up, determine background. This choice determines where the character originated from and what they did before becoming an investigator. This part of creation is purely narrative and has no game mechanic effects on the character. The core rulebook provides a variety of questions to help construct a character's background, including their place of origin, family life, occupation, and their first encounter with the supernatural. Second step, choose a personality trait. Though characters have many elements to their personality, a player should choose one that is somewhat central to their identity. Each trait has a name and narrative description, a beneficial element to the trait, which provides a new ability use for their insight dice, and a negative element to the trait, which can trigger when they suffer a trauma. I haven't explained the mechanics of insight and trauma yet, we'll get there after character creation. For example, the optimistic trait indicates the character believes there is a solution to every problem and a way forward out of every seemingly hopeless situation. There are no problems in their life, only challenges to overcome. Good for them. This life lover can actually heal themselves with positivity, but when they suffer a trauma, they cannot take reactions for the remainder of the scene. Then, in step 3, the player chooses an archetype. This choice defines how they approach conflicts. While an archetype might help determine their job or career, such occupations are fleeting. Anyone can change jobs. I used to serve ice cream, which was fun. You get free ice cream. But now I play and explain games. But an archetype is permanent, and they provide 2 main benefits: a list of skills, which they can improve beyond normal character limits, and a list of knacks, special abilities which can be purchased using experience points. Knacks are divided into 4 tiers, and some knacks are available to multiple archetypes, though possibly at different tiers. There are 8 awesome archetypes in the core book. Adventurer, an investigator who craves the thrill of discovery. Rather than staying cooped up in a library or lab, they're out in the field confronting mysteries and leading teams of explorers. Believer, a character empowered by a faith in something greater than themselves, either a religion of the material world or perhaps something more abstract, perhaps transdimensional. Guardian, who protects others, whether they're friends or allies, or something less tangible such as a community, faith, or an edict. Hunter, who slays monsters. Yeah, they track them and try to understand them too, but mostly they slay. Mystic, who somehow has the innate ability to harness magic. The world of Arkham Horror has many tomes and scrolls with learnable spells and incantations, but only a mystic can summon magic without the need for such tools. Rogue, a sneaky, underhanded investigator. They ignore the rules and conventions of society in order to solve problems and mysteries. Seeker, who studies facts and accumulated knowledge to develop answers about the problems they encounter. Not always a book-bound academic, seekers use their brains over their brawn to resolve conflicts. And Survivor, a character defined by their ability to not die. Whether they're saved by wits, wisdom, or an impressive run speed, survivors persevere through the most daunting of circumstances. Next, step 4, determine starting skill levels. A character starts with all skills at bad, 6+, and can generally improve skills up to a level of good, 4+. However, each archetype has a listing of 3 skills they can eventually get to amazing, 3+, and one they can get to phenomenal on a 2+. All in good time though. For character creation, the player chooses 3 skills to improve to normal on a 5+, and 1 to improve to good, 4+. Finally, in the 5th step, equipment and advancement, the player puts the final touches on the character, gaining 1 Tier 1 knack from the list available to their archetype, $50 worth of starting gear. Chapter 4 of the book contains a detailed list of purchasable items including weapons, protective equipment, and other useful items for investigating the supernatural, and a starting insight pool of 1 die. More on insight in a sec. After completing those 3 steps, the player chooses one option amongst the following: $100 of additional gear, 5 experience points, which can be spent to improve skills or purchase knacks, or an increased insight pool of 2. And that's character creation. As characters progress through adventures, they'll gain experience points, if they survive, and can use them to grow and develop. See pages 66 and 67 of the rules for character advancement options. Okay, a few other important mechanics of the game. A game session is divided into scenes. Scenes are divided into two types, narrative scenes and structured scenes. In narrative scenes, the pacing and passage of time are more lax. Characters explain their actions, and the game master describes the outcomes and reactions of non-player characters. Simple actions are completely free in narrative scenes. Characters don't need to spend a die for basic tasks. Complex actions are a little limited though. Each character can only attempt the exact same task once per scene. The dice pool of each character present in a narrative scene refills at the start of that scene. In structured scenes, the passage of time is tracked by the game master, often because time is of the essence, either it's combat or a direct source of conflict. Structured scenes are divided into rounds, and each player character and their allies gets a single turn in each round. After those are resolved, any adversaries present each take a turn, then a new round begins. During a structured scene, characters refill their dice pools at the start of their turn. They may then take actions with those dice. In a structured scene, a character can attempt the exact same task only once during their turn, but they can attempt the same task again when their next turn comes around. Combat in Arkham Horror is streamlined within the structure scene format. Players use complex actions to make ranged or melee attacks. One important rule of combat is the engaged status. If a character is within 5 feet of someone or something that is easily accessible, the character is engaged with it. When a character makes a ranged attack, they attack a target with a ranged weapon, such as a rifle or grenade. The character cannot be engaged with the target or with any adversaries. They must also be able to see the target, and their weapon must have enough range and a clear line of sight. When a character makes a melee attack, they attack a target with a melee weapon, such as a sword, axe, or even their foot. The character must be engaged with the target unless the melee weapon has a longer listed range. They can be engaged with other adversaries as well. If the attack roll succeeds, the target suffers damage equal to the weapon's listed damage. When a character suffers damage, they reduce their dice pool limit by 1 for each point of damage suffered. If a character's dice pool limit is reduced to 0, the character is wounded, meaning they are at least temporarily incapacitated or stunned. Most weapons can also inflict an injury on the target if the attacker hits and the attacker generates enough successes. Weapons have an injury rating. If the attack generates a number of successes greater than or equal to the injury rating, the target suffers an injury. When a character suffers an injury, they roll a die and apply the result from the injuries table. They add 1 to the result of their roll for each other injury they already have. Other effects may also add to or subtract from the roll on the injuries table. And that's combat! Some additional rules: advantage and disadvantage, defined in the rules as simple and encompassing ways to represent characters aiding one another, circumstances working out in their favor, problems with their environment, or sticky situations. When a character performs an action with advantage, they add 1 additional die to their roll and must remove 1 die with the lowest result. With disadvantage, they add 1 additional die to their roll and must remove 1 die with the highest result. Insight, finally. Insight is a resource unique to player characters. It represents a combination of intuition, luck, and drive. At the beginning of each game session, each investigator gains enough insight up to their insight limit. During the game, investigators can spend that insight to add 1 additional success to a successful complex action, perform an action with advantage, gain a clue from the game master about an ongoing investigation or puzzle, introduce a narrative element into an ongoing scene, usually a convenient occurrence for the character, and they may spend insight to avoid triggering the negative side of their personality trait when they suffer a trauma that normally triggers it. Speaking of trauma, let's finish up with horror. Certain situations, creatures, and spells inflict horror on a character, increasing their horror dice limit. A character's horror dice limit cannot be increased higher than the character's dice pool maximum. Whenever a character refills their dice pool, they must first add horror dice up to their character's horror dice limit to their pool. Horror dice work the same way as regular dice, except horror dice that generate a result of 1 cannot be re-rolled, and when a horror die generates a result of 1, the character suffers a trauma. Traumas represent a character's accumulated horror. Sometimes a trauma is a temporary inconvenience, while at other times it can be a major hindrance. When a character suffers a trauma, they roll 1d6 on the trauma table. They add 1 to the result for each one they rolled on horror dice during the preceding action, taking the listed effect. And that's the basics of Arkham Horror, the role-playing game. There's so much to discover in this extensive core rulebook, including the stats and backgrounds of allies, enemies, and so much more. Also be sure to check out the introductory box set, Hungering Abyss, for a guided introduction into Arkham Horror. And be sure to check back to catch our actual play right here on Good Time Society. I'm Becca Scott, and don't be afraid of the tentacles. They want to be your friends. And we want to be your friend too, so give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and come on back for more great games and good times. Bye-bye!